Welcome, everyone, to a God in a Nutshell interview. My name is Zebulon Rogers. Today, about the very odd and bizarre nature of the case, both the physical events as they happened and the spiritual events that occurred in his life in the intervening years. Alan, thanks for joining us today. Can you hear me okay?
Hear you fine. Thanks, Zeb, for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. It's an honor for us to sit down and talk to you. So I'll get right into it here. In 1998, it was that you guys came to Poudre Canyon. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, and then you and Jocelyn and your son Jaryd kind of wanted a fresh start in life. Things didn't go as well as you'd hoped when you were in California, and you're just looking for a new start. How did you choose Poudre Canyon as a place to kind of plant that seed for a new start?
Well, actually, my twin brother and I are both teachers. We're both teachers at the time, and we really loved Colorado. We vacationed in Colorado every summer. My brother actually thought about moving to Fort Collins at one time. He and his wife got a job, and they couldn't get their house sold, actually, so they ended up going back to California, but they now live in Fort Collins again. But we loved Colorado, and my brother and I wanted to start something different. We decided to look for a business in Colorado, something that we could do that we really enjoyed. And my background was in outdoor recreation and physical education. And so we started looking at some of the resorts, and we came across the Poudre River Resort. We both flew down here, went, checked out the resort, and really enjoyed what we saw, and decided, hey, let's take a shot at that. It just happened to be that when we purchased the resort, I decided to move to Colorado with my kids, and it was nice. It was nice. It was a change. I got out of education, and it was neat to just be with my kids every day at that time.
Good. Yeah. All right, and it was in that year that you put up a lighted cross on the property, and then you mentioned in your book that kind of heralded the start of a mission for you, kind of a personal mission field, helping travelers in distress, not charging for services rendered if they were in trouble along the Poudre Canyon highway there. And as you noted the other day when we were talking, you said, hell came calling after we put up that cross. Could you give us a rundown of the events that followed?
Sure. It's kind of interesting. We put that cross up because we wanted people to know that they had someone to turn to if they were coming through the canyon and if they were having any problems. Once we put the cross up, I actually had close friends come up to me and actually tell me, you don't know what you're doing. You shouldn't mix your beliefs with your business. And at the same time, I'm like, it's my business. It's my belief. Why can't I? And when we did that, we noticed, strange things started happening around us. We had a retreat one weekend, and we had a group come up, a Christian singles group come up, and one of the guys on the way down from the mountain actually had a motorcycle accident on the way out of the canyon. That summer, too, when we first opened up, the canyon had a major rock slide, and it shut the canyon down, and we had a hard time getting business up that first month during that summer. So we had a lot of strange things like that happen. Just had another friend, actually, who his father used to be a minister, and he had a home up in the mountains, and he had some strange things happening, some strange people going by his house and trying to cause problems and things. But it was weird. It felt like you could tell and you could feel there was a spiritual battle going on. You could feel the fact that, something doesn't want that cross there, and something really didn't want us there either.
No, that's pretty clear. And the enemy, they started antagonizing you on a level that's just kind of beyond the norm, for the everyday Christian battle. Christians will, get up one morning and then, things will go wrong, a car will break down, or people are in a foul mood around them and it affects them. That's kind of the mundane level of that. But you experienced something a little bit off the charts there, and despite the fact that there had been other churches in the area for some 40 years at least, and have you ever heard of them encountering any kind of problems like this prior to you setting up that cross, or at any time afterward?
No, not really. We were new to the canyon, and it was just something that we started doing, and it felt a little bit of pushback. I actually took a couple of close friends of mine, and we had several cabins, and we literally took some holy water and went through each of the cabins, each of the windows, blessed the cabins, blessed the business, blessed everything, and asked God for His protection, and asked God to take care of the premises. And when the more we did, the more we depended on God and said, God, let this be your place. Let people come up here and enjoy this place. Like I said, the more we could feel some type of a pushback on us.
All right, so tell us about the first day of Jaryd's disappearance, kind of from the time they left the resort until the revelation that he had been missing.
Well, the interesting thing with Jaryd that morning when he got up, it was strange anyway, because he woke me up because he was standing over me, and as he was standing over me, he didn't say anything, he didn't nudge me, he didn't push me. I could just feel something, and that woke me up. And when I opened my eyes and Jaryd was standing there, we had a little conversation. He had a problem during the night, and I just kind of picked him up and snuggled up with him. After that, we woke up later on in the day, probably maybe, I'm going to guess 7 o'clock in the morning, maybe 6 o'clock in the morning. But we got up and we did our normal thing. And we had several people there staying at the resort. It was a Christian group staying there. And they came up because they wanted to help us get the resort set up for the winter. And so in the meantime, since they were helping, we were giving everybody free cabins for the weekend too. And we were just kind of bartering back and forth. They a group of them came up and said that they wanted to go to the fish hatchery right around the corner. There was a trout hatchery right there, and it was maybe a mile away, if that, and they wanted to walk around and just check out the fish. And Jossie came up, and Jocelyn said, hey, I want to go. Is it okay, Dad? And I'm like, yeah, sure. I don't see a problem with that. She's 6 years old, and like I said, it's less than a mile away. Well, I did not realize that once I told Jocelyn it was okay, that Jaryd would come running up to me afterwards. And Jaryd ran up, and I literally told him no a couple of times. And then the people that went on the hike, one of them came up and said, no, it's okay. It shouldn't be that big of a deal. If you want to let him go, it's all right. So I gave in and let Jaryd go too. I remember it quite well. And the reason why I remember it so well is because I put both the kids into a car in front of the resort. This one car that was pulled up in the front of our resort. We had a store there and gas pumps, and they pulled up right there. And I walked up to both Jocelyn and Jaryd on each side of the car, rolled their window down, and kissed them both goodbye. And we always had this thing that we said, I love you, and the next person said, I love you more. And I had no idea I was kissing my son goodbye for the last time. I mean, they both had big smiles on their faces, and they were excited to be going up on this little trail to look at the fish. And I was excited for them, too. Well, they took off. And when they took off to go up to the trail, or just like a mile away, like I said, I went back in the back of the resort. I was doing some cleaning and stuff, and I decided, I can't remember if it was maybe an hour and a half later. I sat down to just take a break, and I barely closed my eyes. And as I closed my eyes, I heard a ruckus going on in the store. Our apartment was connected to the store. You could walk right through. And I didn't know what was going on, so I kind of opened my eyes, and I could hear a couple of ladies making a big ruckus with one of our managers in the store, and all three of them come walking back into the apartment, and they were still very animated, talking loudly. And I got up, walked over them and they looked at me and they said, Alan, we need to talk to you. And I'm like, sure, what's the problem? And they said, it's about Jaryd. And I said, well, what do you mean it's about Jaryd? And then it became that 20 questions game. I started asking all kinds of questions. What's wrong with Jaryd? I said, did he fall? Oh, no, he didn't fall. I said, well, did he break an arm or break a leg or something? Oh, no. I said, did he turn an ankle? What happened to him? And their response to me was, he's okay, we just can't find him. And when they said, he's okay, we just can't find him, I'm like, what do you mean you can't find him? How do you know he's okay? And then they proceeded to tell me, by the way, we went up 16 and a half miles up the canyon, up to a place called the Big South Trail, and we can't find him. We lost him on the Big South Trail. I definitely, you know, as any parent would, I was very frustrated, full of anxiety at the time. Our assistant manager at the resort, a good friend of mine named Butch, he came up to me and said, you know, let me call search and rescue right now. And I told him, no, I don't want you calling search and rescue. I said, the reason I didn't want him calling search and rescue, because in my own heart, I was going to go up and I was going to find him. I figured, I'm going to walk up, I'll go up that trail, I'll yell Jaryd, I'm Jaryd's father, Jaryd's going to hear me and Jaryd's going to come running back to me. And that's what I thought. So when I drove up the trail, or drove up the canyon to the trail, and while I was driving, I mean, my whole body just became something that I'd never experienced before. I was literally pounding on my chest, yelling in my car, asking what happened to my son, and praying and saying, God, what did they do to my son? Where did they take my son? Did they take my son to his death? What happened? God, please help me. And I screamed and yelled and beat my chest all the way up that canyon. And it took me a good 20 minutes, half hour to get up to the trail, because it's a winding canyon in the works. Once I got to the trail, there was somebody that just come down who had been on a hike with Jaryd, and they said, here, let me take you up, let me show you where we went. So we went running up the trail. Literally, I was running up the trail. And about every 10 seconds, I was yelling everything that I'd ever called Jaryd in my life. And I called him bro, I called him Jaryd, I called him J-Rod, kidding around all the time. And I was yelling, Jaryd, J-Rod, bro, where are you? Daddy's here, please come on down. Daddy's got you, Daddy's going to take care of you. And as we kept going up that trail, I got hit with that realization that, oh my gosh, this is vast. This is incredible. How am I going to find my son? And then I began thinking, I just realized I told Butch not to call search and rescue. That was probably the dumbest thing I could have ever done. And I had a radio with me that we used at the resort. And as I was coming back down that trail, I started clicking my radio, hoping that Butch could hear me. And finally, Butch came on the radio, and I said, Butch, I said, you're not going to believe this, but you need to go call search and rescue. And Butch was already in the parking lot at the Big South Trail, and he called back to me. He says, don't worry, I called him the second you left. So the time I actually got back into the parking lot, there was a deputy in the canyon. He was already at the Big South Trailhead. I knew him fairly well because, you know, he came to our business all the time. He stopped, had coffee with us in the works, and he's like, Alan, you know, don't worry. I've called search and rescue. They're on their way. They're going to be up here, and our guys we have a great team, and if he's up here, we're going to find him. And that's where I was at that point.
Okay. And how long did it take search and rescue to mobilize that day? Were they up on the trail that day? I know that the next day there was a helicopter that flew over.
Oh yeah, they were there. I would say I was probably back in the parking lot for maybe, I'm guessing, half hour, 45 minutes at the time. Search and rescue had flown up the canyon from Fort Collins, and here's a weird thing too. I was sitting in the parking lot, and my attention went from Jaryd to my daughter Jocelyn, and I started thinking, oh my gosh, my son's lost. They can't find him. Where's my daughter? I want my daughter right now. And somebody told me that Janice had taken Jocelyn back down the trail and decided to go back to the resort to see if maybe somebody had taken Jaryd back to the resort. So this entire time I'm thinking, well, how did my daughter get by me? I mean, how did these people get by me without me seeing them? So I was confused by that, but it was not long after that, Janice showed back up in the parking lot, and she was really crying, and of course she was very distressed, and she came up running to me, apologizing, saying, I'm sorry, and I just put my arms around her and told her, don't worry about it, they're going to find him. It's okay, they're going to find him. And she was a mess. And, what else could I say except look at her and say, we're going to be all right. They're going to find him. And then search and rescue showed up. And they started putting on their gear, and one of the guys literally walked up to me and said, "Sir, if your son's up here, we'll find him." And I didn't think anything of it. I thought, that's cool. Well, later on, weeks and months had gone by, that started echoing in my mind, if he's up here, we'll find him. So I started thinking, what's the opposite of that? Well, the opposite of that is, if he's not up here, we're not going to find him. So with that in mind, I started thinking, you know what? He's not up here. They didn't find him, so he can't be up here, because these guys said they'd find him. And they were a great group of guys. Good search team.
And now the next morning, this is when things really start to get odd. That morning, you and Jocelyn heard the whooping of the helicopter flying over, and at that point, you were filled with a lot of hope that this is it, they're going to bring him home. But you got a call from somebody who wasn't the sheriff's department, who didn't communicate with you at all. We'll get into that in a little bit. That something had happened to the helicopter.
Well, what happened was, we got up that morning. I had no idea that a helicopter would be flying up the canyon. It was a Huey, and I went out, and we sold newspapers out on the front of the resort. And I went to the newspaper rack, and right in big headlines right across the front, it said, boy missing in Poudre Canyon. And that's when it really hit me. I'm like, oh my gosh, man. I mean, this thing's real. And so Jossie and I, we started hearing this whopping sound, that the helicopter makes just coming up the canyon. And we both ran out into the parking lot, and we looked back down the canyon, and I picked her up. She was in my arms, and this helicopter come flying, loudly, right over us. And I looked at Jossie, and I said, Joss, that's the helicopter that's going to find your brother today. You're going to find him. And so I really believed in my heart that, it wouldn't be much longer until we had Jaryd in our arms. Well, the helicopter had been, it was probably an hour after the helicopter had passed us. And I started getting questions. I started getting phone calls, actually. Phone calls from people that lived in the canyon but back down the canyon from us. And they'd call, and I'd answer the phone, and they'd ask, Alan, did they find Jaryd? I'm like, what do you mean, did they find Jaryd? Well, a bunch of emergency vehicles just went by with their sirens on, just went up the canyon. So we're calling to see if they found Jaryd. I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about. From what I know nothing yet. And then I got a couple more phone calls. Same thing. Hey, did they find Jaryd? These emergency vehicles just flew by our home right now. And I'm like, again, I don't know. And so as people are asking me things, somebody else called me, and I don't recall who it was, and they said, hey, we heard the helicopter crashed up there. No, that's what it was. Jocelyn's mom had showed up at the resort, and she went to another resort below us. And she went to try to get Jocelyn out of the way. And when they were in the resort, they heard somebody say, hey, did you hear about the little boy that's lost up in the canyon? The helicopter crashed. That's how we found out about it. So she come flying back into the parking lot. She got out of the car, and she said, I just heard the helicopter crashed. And I'm like, what? What do you mean the helicopter crashed? And I tried getting a hold of people up on the mountain. Nobody would respond to me. So I ended up calling the sheriff's department, and I got, I guess it was someone from dispatch or what, and I started asking questions. I said, listen, I just heard the helicopter crashed that was looking for the little boy. Can you tell me, can you validate that story for me? And she said, no, I'm sorry, I'm not allowed to give you any information. And I said, listen, you don't understand. I said, that little boy that's lost is my son, and nobody's sharing any information with me whatsoever. Can you please just let me know what's going on? And she said, well, I'm not allowed to say anything. And I said, just tell me, did the helicopter crash? And she finally said, yes, the helicopter crashed. I said, thank you. That's all I need to know. And that's how I found out about it. Nobody reached out to me. Nobody thought about, how are we feeling, especially when those same emergency vehicles went flying by us. If I wouldn't have heard of anything, I'd have been thinking right then too, oh my gosh, I'd be asking the same question, did they find my son? But I actually had to call the sheriff's department and beg a person at dispatch to give me the information concerning the crash.
And when the police arrived and started doing reports, started doing a formal search up on the mountain, they began to act in a way that is just kind of counterintuitive to a search. You know, people offered the best tracking dogs in the state. Expert trackers showed up. I remember Don Bendel's story of coming in and having driven, 1,000 miles or so and being turned away for help. Why, what were the events, as they happened regarding law enforcement's involvement here, and then how did they justify their attitude toward the case?
Well, I don't know if they really justified it, but how it originally happened is one of the deputies in charge of the search was in our resort, and along with the someone else that works with them, the victim's advocate, and the phone rang. And I answered the phone, and I don't know who this person was, but this person asked to speak with me, and I said, yeah, this is Alan. And they said, listen, we have some great search dogs. We'd like to bring them up and help in the search for your son. And I got excited. I'm like, seriously, really? I said, bring them up. And I said, but the guy who's in charge of the search, he's in the store right now. I'm going to let you talk to him. And so I took the phone. I said, hey, listen, there's people on the other side of the line. They have search dogs. They want to bring them up. They'd like to talk to you. And he literally took the phone, turned away from me, and started walking away from me and said to them on the phone, hey, thanks for your help. If we need you, we'll call you. Thank you. And hung up. And I thought right then, wait a second. You said, thanks for your help. We'll call you if we need you. Yet, you never asked these people for their name or their phone number. How can you call them back? And that was my first experience with them. Later on, I don't know if it was later on that day or the next day, that's when Don Bendel called me. Same thing. Hey, Alan, I've got some of the best search dogs. I even have horses that search really well. I have a group that wants to, animals and stuff that wants to come up and help search for your son. And I said to him, you bet, bring them on up. I didn't ask anybody at that time, because last time I asked somebody, they said, oh yeah, we'll call you if you need you. I told them, I said, thanks, Don. I appreciate your time. I appreciate your effort. Please come up. Then I drove up to the canyon, to the trailhead, and let them know, by the way, this guy called me, and I told him to come up. Mm-hmm. And when he showed up, the media was there, and the sheriff was there, and when he showed up, the sheriff went to him and told him, no, you're not allowed on this trail. You cannot walk up on this trail at all. And Don literally grabbed the sheriff by the arm and walked away and said, see all those people over there with those cameras? Either we're up here for the same reason to find Jaryd, or we're not. If you don't let me up that trail, I'm going to go walk up there and tell every one of them that I'm here to help, and you won't let me up here. And finally the sheriff said, yeah, the sheriff gave him a radio and said, yeah, I want you to stay in contact with my search and rescue team, and I'll go ahead and let you go up the trail. But he had to threaten him to get up the trail.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, unbelievable.
And after that, too, though, I had literally people from the canyon would call. They wrote letters in different newspapers saying how they asked to help, and they were all turned away. I found out there was a search and rescue group, the Arapahoe Rescue Patrol, offered their services. They were turned away. It was maybe 4 or 5 years later, I ran into another lady. I'd never met her before, and she told me, Alan, we had the top search dogs in the state, and everybody knew it. And my husband and I called several times. All we wanted to do was help find your son, and we were told each time, no, don't bring your dog up here. And so I didn't realize how deep it went, and I didn't realize I'd continue to run into people that would tell me the same story. But I think it came down to one of those situations. I believe it was almost like, you know what, it's our game, it's our ball, and if you don't like our rules, we're going to take our ball and go home. And that's how I felt, because I was actually told at one time, if you don't like what we're doing, we'll get off the mountain right now. And I'm like, wow, are you serious? So, but yeah, it was pretty interesting.
Now, there was a tracker named Sue that came in to help, and he was an Army Ranger. Tell us how you ran into him at the store and what he had to say regarding.
No problem. The interesting thing with Sue and Don, they're both Army Rangers, and neither one of them realized that the other person was, in the same field they were in at one time. Both highly respected in their field. But what happened was, I believe it was a Thursday night, and this guy comes into the resort, and his name was Sue. I found out what his name was later on, but he comes into the resort, big guy, and he comes up to the register, and I was up at the trail quite often, but I always went back to the store to try to give myself a little bit, bring a little bit of normalcy back to my life. I was up there and I was just frustrated, so I'd get away, just try to keep myself busy. And so this night, this gentleman walked up to the counter, and he had a few snacks and a drink, and he threw them up on the counter, and I start just a small talk with him and start ringing him up, and he says, I need some food and something to drink. It's been a long day. I've been up there helping with that little boy, trying to find that little boy. And I looked at him, I said, really? I said, well, man, I really want to thank you for helping out. I really appreciate it. And he's like, well, why would you want to thank me? Who are you? And I said, Jaryd's my son. And he says, oh my gosh. He said, Jaryd's your son? I said, yes. He says, I got to show you something. He takes out a piece of paper and goes, I got to show you where he is. And so he starts drawing the river, the trail, the hills and everything, and he takes a pen and he puts an X and he says, he's right there. I know he's right there. I've tracked him right here. Just can't find him. He said, but what I need you to do, no one will listen to me. No one will send anybody up there. So do me a favor. Can you call the sheriff and ask him, give him this map and ask him to go up there and look for your son, because I know he's right in that area. Well, the interesting thing was, Jaryd's mom was there, and Jaryd's mom heard that end of the conversation, and she said, are you going to call the sheriff? And I said, no, I'm not going to call him. I said, because every time I call, I get shot down. I said, they just ignore everything I ask. I said, if you want to call, you go ahead and call. So she called the sheriff and had a long talk with him, and she got off the phone. She was excited, and she said, they're gonna look into it, and they'll give us a call back in the morning. And I kind of laughed at her and said, yeah, they're going to call you in the morning to tell you they're not going to do it. I said, don't get your hopes up. And that's exactly what happened. The next morning we received a phone call, and the phone call was, well, we really don't have the time and the resources to go right in that spot. And the helicopter did a flyby in that area, and we didn't see anything. The sad part was, 3.5 years later, when they find Jaryd's clothing and stuff, it's just about right in that exact same spot where that X was. And so it's kind of heartbreaking.
And let's kind of jump ahead to that now. When Jaryd's clothing was found, to give viewers an idea of where this was found, this hill was, I guess I would say, is about like a 50-degree slope. 55 degree slope. It was really steep. It's very rocky. There's a lot of land that kind of likes to give way a little bit. And yet these two hikers just almost surreptitiously just kind of break the trail, go up there, and then there's Jaryd's clothing. What did they initially find, and what condition did they find it in?
Well, I'll tell you what, if you give me just a second,
sure,
I'll be right back. Hold on.
Yep, absolutely.
Sorry about that. First thing they found were his shoes. And this is the actual shoe they found. And they found his shoes, they found his jacket that he was wearing, and they found his pants. And the part to me that was really confusing is when they found his clothing and stuff, they literally, and I'm not saying anything bad, I mean, I'm sure these two guys are fantastic guys and have great reputations and all that. They found his clothing, and they knew Jaryd was missing, and they had a feeling that this was Jaryd's clothing. But the thing is they both went down the mountain that night and didn't even go to the sheriff's department right off the bat. They went to bed. They went to sleep. They got up the next day, went to work. They worked all day. And then that night, they decided to take the stuff down to the sheriff's department. So it was like a full day later when the sheriff's department got it. The interesting thing with Jaryd's shoes, and I know it's kind of hard to see right here, but Jaryd's shoes, a lot of people believe, this shoe was in the mountains for almost 4 years. And I have some new shoes just like this, and there's not a lot of difference. Now, some people were saying, you know what? It could have been a mountain lion. It could have been a mountain lion. It could have dragged your son up the mountain. Okay, I'm willing to listen to everything. But Jaryd never tied his shoes. His shoes were untied all the time. Here's the thing. It was over 500 feet of climbing on that 50-degree angle going up the mountain where they found Jaryd's clothing and stuff. Number one, Jaryd's shoes, he didn't tie them. So if a mountain lion happened to be dragging him up the mountain like this, you would see scratch marks on his shoe. Mm-hmm. And there's nothing there. Absolutely. Nothing. And if he was being dragged the other way, like this, up the mountain, you would see scratch marks on the back of his shoe. Yeah. Again, there's nothing there. Yeah, and there's nothing there. So it was just kind of hard to look at certain things. Let me see if I can find something else here. His pants and his shirt, when the thing about a mountain lion, when a mountain lion attacks you, a mountain lion actually will tear into your stomach region because that's what it eats. It eats your internal organs there. So therefore, I mean, if you can imagine somebody having a pullover jacket, if a mountain lion got into that area, it would rip the jacket apart, and it would be a mess. There would probably be hairs on it. There definitely would be blood. There would probably also be some type of human tissue there. We sent Jaryd's clothing off to the CBI. No hairs, no blood, and this was Jaryd's jacket that they found. Now, here's the thing about Jaryd's jacket. You see the stomach region? Hey, it's intact. It's not like something attacked him. Now, I know people are saying, oh, yeah, well, there are little holes and stuff in different places. Yeah, it was up there supposedly for 4 years. But again, there's nothing there on the stomach region. So it's hard to buy into that theory, especially when, like I said, we got back the results from the CBI, and there was no blood, nothing on there. If you look at Jaryd's pants, when people saw Jaryd's pants, it was a whole different story. It was like, well, they look at Jaryd's pants, and here's the interesting thing about Jaryd's pants. When they sent me the picture to see if I could identify Jaryd's clothing, I didn't see what I should have seen originally. I ended up emailing the pictures to my brother, to my father, to family members saying, hey, you're not going to believe this, they found Jaryd's clothing. It was my dad who called me and said, how come his pants are inside out? And I'm like, they're inside out? What do you mean? So I went back and looked at the picture and went, oh my gosh, they are inside out. So again, I've been told by many mountain lion experts, if a mountain lion does attack you, it doesn't pull your pants off and leave them there inside out. Right. And so again, it was kind of confusing. It's kind of hard to see Jaryd's pants right here. That's the one leg, and there's a leg missing. And people were like, oh my gosh, his leg's missing. Something must have attacked him in the whole works. Well, I was told by the deputies themselves and the sheriff, that's not the problem. What happened here is if you go up to the area where Jaryd's clothing was found, this is a velour, like a sweat material. And when you go up there, there's little bitty pieces of blue fiber all over the mountain, all over the trees and everything right there. And what happened was there were rodents and birds and everything else pulling Jaryd's pants apart using the material as nesting. So it wasn't like, oh, geez, something took his leg off and the whole works. And again, like I said, the interesting thing is Dr. Baden out of New York, he even said, hey, you know what? If this would have happened, you would find some type of tissue in his shoe. And there was nothing there. And he actually told me, he said, don't let them tell you that something attacked him because something strange with this story. But that's what they found. It was a week later. I'll show you this. It was a week later when we were up on the mountain. I went back up with them the week after that, And when I went back with them the week after that, I had a really weird encounter at the bottom of the mountain, to where they didn't want anything to do with me and the works. And it's a long story, but when we got up top of the mountain, we did find a tooth, and we found part of a cranium. This right here is literally the cranium that we have. This is the cap. This is Jaryd's skull cap right here. What I'm holding right here is my son. What's left of my son. And the reason why you see all these cuts and everything in it is we had 3 DNA tests done on this to see if it was Jaryd. And the first 2 came back, it could be 86% chance that it's Jaryd. Well, of course, I'm like 86% chance. Well, that's not going to fly in court. I want to know 100% if it's Jaryd. And it took until about, I think it's going to be 3 years ago now, where the same person who did the DNA test on the Kobe Bryant case here in Colorado took Jaryd's case. And he actually, I sent this to him, and he extrapolated some DNA, some good DNA in different areas, and he gave me 100%. He confirmed that it was Jaryd.
Unbelievable. And with the condition that they found the top of the skull versus the tooth was one of the points in the case that David Politis points out. Why wasn't the tooth buried? The skull was kind of buried under some debris, and you'd had a conversation with Dr. Baden regarding that, you would at least find a tooth. That was what his interview on TV had pointed out.
Exactly.
And the authorities had no explanation to give you.
No. And see, it's kind of hard to see on here, but there are a lot of different scratches all over the cranium and stuff. And that's another one of the big questions. What could have caused all these different scratches and everything? I was contacted by a woman, a professional who studies people, studies bones, studies artifacts and all that. And yes, and she came out, and it was really interesting because she was really gung-ho in helping me out. And she was telling me all kinds of things. And she told me, I know exactly what caused those scratches. She said what caused those scratches is when the bone is rolling in the river and it's hitting the rocks and all that in the river. That's what causes scratches. And she also said to me, and she's a professional. Her and her buddy are experts, and this is what they do for a livelihood. Then she came out and said, one of the things too about the lower jaw, the mandible will break off quite easily. And as that is rolling through the river, it's going to lose the lower jaw. And then it's going to lose the teeth and everything. Well, I'm like, okay, no problem. So I said to her, you don't understand. I said, when they found Jaryd's cranium, the tooth that they found was from the lower mandible. So if it's from the lower mandible, how could it be? You said if it's rolling through the river, the lower jaw is going to break off and those teeth are going to fall out. So how could they be together? And she's like, well, I don't know and all that. Then she came out and said to me, it's kind of funny, and I respect what she had to say, but she came out and said to me, which to me is a greater mystery. She said, you know what? I believe the reason why you found this stuff, where you found everything, was because the canyon probably flooded at one time. And when it flooded, it deposited that stuff back on the hillside. And then I said to her, I said, gosh, that all sounds plausible, but you got to understand. I said, this was found. If you take the lower part of the mountain, 500 feet up here, and the river's way down here. Mm-hmm. I said, there's no flood in this world right now that flooded 500 feet in that canyon and deposited this up 500 feet up on the canyon wall. I said, besides that, how did it deposit the tooth there? How did it deposit his clothes and the whole works? And she was pretty baffled by it. And then she said, you know what, let me go talk to my friend again and go over some things. Then she wanted a map that showed all the location of everything. And I have a map of that. So I sent her the map. And the interesting thing was, after all that, after I kept every theory that she said should be plausible, I questioned it because of the location of things. She quit contacting me after that last one. As a matter of fact, it's kind of funny. I'm lucky because I went back and I copied our complete conversation, because we were communicating on Facebook, in the chat area. I copied everything and pasted it in a Word document so I could save it. Well, I'm glad I did, because the other night, like I said, when we were talking, I went back to look for it. It was gone. She had taken it all down. It was gone. I couldn't find it. So people contact me and they want to help, but when I start explaining this, and this, they freak out too, and they walk away. They're like, oh man, I don't want to get involved anymore. I mean, I've had people that have come up and made comments about the tooth, and at the same time, when we start talking about things, they disappear on me. And so there are a lot of people out there who want to help, but I think there are a lot of people, once they start diving in, the mystery just starts to deepen, and they end up backing off some.
Yeah, you instantly feel like, even when I thought I knew a little something about the tooth. I'll admit that and rip that Band-Aid off right now, and it turned out not to be the case. And when you start putting it all together, the tooth, the top of the skull, the distance from the trail, how it was found, what the police were doing, and the things that happened to you with that lighted cross after that was put up, a person feels like they're just suddenly underwater, because you know better than anyone, it's just so overwhelming. Like, which way do we look?
Oh, yes.
And so, but we're going to kind of go a different direction here. We'll come back to the evidence again. In the intervening years between when Jaryd went missing and then, a ways after, there was some other events of a spiritual nature that kind of helped the healing process a little bit. Let's talk about a few of those.
There are a lot of strange events. It was kind of weird. It was kind of like Jaryd, in a way, was trying to say, Dad, you know what? The first thing that ever happened to me was, I believe it was maybe the second night after Jaryd disappeared. And I had a really intense dream. And the dream was Jaryd standing there in front of me. He had his blue pants on. He didn't have a shirt on. And here's the interesting thing. They found all this, but they never found his shirt. We didn't have a shirt on in that dream. And he was literally standing there. He had his arms crossed. His hair was combed back. And he looked at me and said, Daddy, I'm okay. I want you to know I'm okay. And oh man, I woke up. I just bounced up out of bed that night. And it was like it was real. It was like he was standing there right next to me telling me that. And it was an intense connection with him. But after that, strange things happened. My brother and I, the very Saturday after Jaryd disappeared, we drove back down the canyon. I was back at my place, and we went shopping. And I believe we were just walking through this Kmart across the street from my house. And as we're walking down this aisle, this big old whole bunch of paper towels falls on top of us from the top of the still. Just falls off, and it's like. I kind of, had a funny thought, and I looked at my twin brother, and I'm like, how did that happen? He looked at me and he said, you know how it happened. And I'm like, well, you tell me how it happened. He says, Jaryd pushed those on us on purpose as we walked by, just to say, hey, I know you're here. And we both laughed and enjoyed it, because we really felt like Jaryd was messing with us. I had a class one time. I'm a teacher, and I was in the gym with my kids, and I had my kids all sitting down in the gym, and in the back room at this big storage room, well, the radio comes on. It starts blaring, and the kids are like, hey, Mr. A, who turned the radio on? And I'm like, don't worry about it. I know who turned it on. Just don't worry about it. And they're like, no, really, who turned the radio on? I said, just don't worry about it. That was for me, not for you. And they actually said, can we go check? And they ran into the room and they came back and they're like blown away, like, Mr. A, nobody's in there. I said, I told you not to worry about it. That was for me. It wasn't for you. We had stuff like that. I had one night, it was really weird. I typed this poem, and the poem said, it was titled, What Did Jesus Say? And it was Jesus talking to me about my son, Jaryd. And I emailed it to my mother, and just so she could look at it. Well, in the meantime, I've got my dad on the phone. I mean, we were all still just real close and just trying to figure this thing out. And I emailed it, like I said to my mom. I had my dad on the phone, and I hear this loud noise in my bedroom. So I walk into the bedroom, and I tell my dad, the heavy curtain with the weight, the drawstring on it was just swaying back and forth on the window. And I said, Dad, let me go shut the window. A storm's blowing, and I want to shut the window. So I went, and I pulled the curtain back to shut the window, and the window was closed. And my dad's like, I was freaking out then. My dad's like, what's wrong? I said, oh my gosh, Dad. I said, you're not going to believe this. I said, the window's closed. This stupid thing's swinging back and forth here. I don't know what's going on. I started freaking out. Well, in the meantime, I hang up with my dad, and my mom calls me. Honey, this is a nice poem, but what does 8217 mean? I'm like, what do you mean, what does 8217 mean? She goes, it's all through this thing, 8217, 8217. I'm like, Mom, there's no 8217 in there. And so she emailed it back to me, and it wasn't. There's no 8217 through there. So she said, you know what, honey? She says, she used to work at a school too. She goes, when I get to school tomorrow, I'm going to fax this to your school. I'm like, sure. So I get to school the next day, she faxes it to me, and oh my goodness, I got 8217 all through this thing. So again, that became one of those, okay, what's going on? What's this 8217? And I had friends and everyone were like, okay, could that be part of a license plate? Could that be part of a phone number? Could that be a verse you need to look up? What could it be? And we were just all diving into this thing. And it must have been about 10 days later. 10 days later, my mom calls me and she says, honey, I know what it is. And I'm like, well, what is it, Mom? And she said, if you take the 8th letter of the alphabet, the 21st letter of the alphabet, and the 7th letter of the alphabet, that's H-U-G. It spells hug. She said, Jaryd was sending you. And to this day, that's what I believe. I believe that, God has allowed me to have things happen in my life to realize that my son's okay. That I don't have to worry about him. He's all right.
I believe that too. So, as far as what Jocelyn remembers and what Jocelyn has experienced, I understand she has a degree in criminology now.
Yes.
And did that kind of help her understand anything new regarding the events? Did it kind of help piece some things together?
The interesting thing is, I think she got that so that she could help other people in situations like ours. But the interesting thing is she was also working at the one of the police departments here in Colorado, and she had her degree, and all of that helped her with certain things. I found out that there were I had no idea until like 2 years ago that there were all these pictures in Jaryd's case, different reports and all that, never offered to me. I had one report, but not others, and nothing was ever offered to me. And she's like, "Hey, Dad, you know what? I'm finding out a lot of things here, and there are these reports, and you can, as the father, you can request all this stuff, or us as a family, we can request it." And because of her knowledge and understanding what was going on, behind the scenes, we actually had a bunch of stuff mailed to us on a CD. That all the reports, pictures and everything. So if it wasn't for her knowledge about what's going on behind the scenes, I wouldn't even have those reports. So it was kind of nice to see all that come in. So she's kind of helped me in the backside, trying to say, Dad, there are some things too that I can help you with that you haven't done yet. So it's been kind of nice.
Right on. Well, great. I'm glad to hear that. And just briefly going back to the evidence, just a couple more things to cover. The tooth was sent in for DNA extraction, and they decided that it had been contaminated.
Right. What happened was I just didn't trust anyone anymore, to be honest with you. And so they, I guess it was the CBI here, Colorado Bureau of Investigation. They worked on the DNA, the tests, and the whole works, and they got these things called electropherograms that are created through the DNA test in itself. I don't know the science behind them. I just know that you can look at them, an expert can look at them and say, hey, okay, I know what's going on here. I ended up getting hold of an expert in Ohio at Wright University, and the first thing he asked was, well, do you have the electropherograms? And I'm like, well, yeah, sure. And I faxed them to him. And when he got them, I not only faxed them, I sent an email. I emailed them to him. But as soon as he got them, he called me back and said, well, this is kind of strange. I'm like, what do you mean? He says, did you know the DNA from the tooth was contaminated? And I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Because like I said, I couldn't tell, make sense out of any of that. And he said, yeah, I'm looking at all this, and there's more than one DNA in the tooth here, more than one person. He said, we as professionals, we don't do that. Matter of fact, we make sure we don't do that. We work on things so well to make sure there is no contamination. So he said, I don't know what happened here. He said, but you can't make heads or tails out of this because there's more than one person's DNA on this tooth. I'm like, wow, no kidding. And the sad part is like, well, I can't get the tooth back to send to him so he can look at it, because when they did the DNA test on the tooth, they completely destroyed the tooth. So it's completely gone.
Seemed like very amateur level work.
Yeah, it's just, like I said too, and whoever created or got those electropherograms from the DNA originally, they knew by looking at it themselves it was contaminated. And they never even said to me, hey, Alan, by the way, we don't know what happened here. We tried to figure out if there's any of Jaryd's DNA in this tooth, and somehow we got this thing screwed up and contaminated it. Nothing like that. It was just, here you go. He'll never be able to read. He'll never know what's going on here.
Well, how can we pray for you, the writers and the viewers of God in a nutshell? How can we pray for you and help maybe somehow bring closure to this case from a spiritual side of things?
Well, the interesting part about that is, God provides peace. God provides comfort. Sometimes we don't get the answers that we're looking for, but at the same time, that's because God's carrying us through it. And at this point in my life, I know there are a lot of answers, or a lot of questions that need to be answered, and we're not getting answers. I don't know why, but all I pray for or ask for others is just to continue to pray for peace, understanding. I'm at a point in my life, this happened back in 1999. I was very frustrated at the time, but I'm at a point in my life, I realized that, this caused consternation for more than my life, for a lot of people's lives. And a lot of people are having to deal with this entire situation. I just want peace for them too. Not just pray for my peace, but pray for the peace and the comfort to all those involved, to everyone involved, that we may all walk this earth and not look back and say, God, thank you for what we have in front of us.
Amen. We will definitely do that. Anything else you'd like to add before we sign off for the evening?
No, I just want to tell you thanks again, Zeb. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate your interest in my son's story, and I just enjoy the fact that even though my son's not with me, he's still part of my life every day.
Amen. Thank you very much, Alan, for joining us. God bless you. We're praying for you, and have an awesome, peaceful year.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right. Have a good night.
Bye-bye.